A very good evening to everyone. I would just go briefly uh, through some historical perspective of Myanmar that has direct connection to the present crisis of today with the Rohingyas. Uh, um, so the first thing is that Myanmar is composed of like around 135 ethnic groups. And among these 135 ethnic groups, 9 ethnic groups are majority. These are Bamar, Chin, Kachin, Mon, Shan, Arakanese, Rohingyas, Rakhine, etc. And the previous name of Myanmar was Burma. We have to keep this perspective in our mind that Myanmar was under British uh, regime, or it became British colony in 1824. Since 1824 till 1948, Burma was under British colony. And from 1937 to 1948, Burma was a separate colony. Before that, it was a province under British India. This is one of the reasons the Burmese, particularly the Bamar, they feel anxiety with with the Indians, because when Burma was under British India, it was mostly the Indian civil service who ran the administration in Rangoon or Yangon and all entire the Burma. So the Burmese, particularly the Bamar, they were a bit aggrieved. The same way, the way we see the British as Borgi or as intruder, to the Burmese people, it is not only the British, it is also the Indians from the British India who ruled them, who took away all the opportunities or most of the opportunities from them. So that was one of the reason for their grievance, and they really wanted to get separated not only from the Indian civil administration but also from Britain as well. But the initiation was, or the first step was to become a separate colony from the British India, so not to be recognized as a province of India. Okay. And the Aung San, the father of the Aung San Suu Kyi, and his 30 fellows, who are known as 30 comrades, or who are the previous member of the Rangoon University Student Union, they were so vocal and they led that separation movement. In fact, they were the key persons who played active role for the independence of Burma. Unfortunately, Aung San was assassinated in 1947, but he and his fellow mates, they actually ran all those activities against the British regime for the independence of Burma. And here there is an interesting part. They got the assistance of the Japanese military, because the Japan was actually, like if we consider the context of the Second World War, Japan was against the Allied force, against the British regime. So when Japan invaded Thailand in 1941, the Aung San and his fellow 30 comrades, they had a kind of contact. They created contact with the Japanese military, because they had been trying to get separated from Britain, from the British regime. And when Japanese army appeared in Thailand, they started contacting, and Japanese army took that opportunity. And later on, we see that in 1942, Japan invaded Burma. And to some extent, Burma got separated from the British regime till around 1946. Although the defeat of the Japan again gave the opportunity to Britain to regain the control of Burma. But meanwhile, these 30 martyrs, they created Burmese Independent Army, BIA. And this BIA, or Burmese Independent Army, is the, you can say, is the origin of the present Tatmadaw, or the present Burmese army. So if you ask the Burmese military or the Myanmar military, what is your origin, they will actually point out to that Burmese Independent Army. They feel that proud, right? That we actually emerged from a historical struggle. But the problem happened after the assassination of the Aung San. His friends, actually, it is, although it's a conspiracy theory, but it is also believed that the friend of Aung San, that is Unu, he was behind the assassination of the Aung San. And then he ruled till 1962 until the General Ne Win. He was also the friend of Aung San. So General Uno, General Uno, for the mistake, General Ne Win created a coup, staged a coup, and took the power from Uno. And the Myanmar formally came under a martial regime. So what is the change here? When Aung San envisioned for an inclusive Burma, where the representation of all the ethnic groups would be there in the government, later on, it actually distracted after his assassination. And when the General Ne Win came to the power, they tried to create Burma, or they developed Burma as a defense club. I would call it as a defense club merely. It is not a state, because if we go through the definition of the state, there has to be some representation of the people, or at least when we talk about the republic, that means a kind of representation of the people has to be ensured in the government. But from the very beginning, like since 1962, when Burma came under the martial regime, under the General Ne Win, it was the military all in all, fading away or gradually depriving all the other ethnic groups. And General Ne Win was from Bamar ethnicity. And Bamar are the majority, more than 60% population of Burma or Myanmar is Bamar. So the ultra-nationalism started from there. Why? I can remember, like, one of the member of the government of Aung San, that like in the pre-independence independence of Burma, it was Abdul Razak Hussain. He was a former minister of education, and he was a Rohingya. So this was the vision, and this was the activities of Aung San, which actually was completely denied and faded away by the martial regime. And later on, what we have seen in 2008, the Tatmadaw, or the Myanmar or Burmese military, wrote a new constitution of the Myanmar. Why on that time, like after 1962, after all this year in 2008, why a new constitution is being written in Burma? Because that time it was a global recession, and already sanctions were imposed upon Burma. The sanctions were imposed by the Europeans, by the Americans, and the so-called liberal Western world. But they were actually looking for opportunities for new investments. All these years, China, officially or unofficially, maintained economic relation with the Myanmar, because under the sanctions of the Europeans and Americans, China was the only hope for supply of the essential goods. But when the global recession of 2008 happened, the Europeans were desperately looking for entering into new markets. So they started negotiating with the Burmese military. Okay, maybe we can come to an agreement that you'd allow the political parties of Myanmar to take part into election, and we would withdraw the economic sanctions from Myanmar, and Burmese Tatmadaw would get a kind of legitimacy, a passive legitimacy from that process. So we see the initiation of new constitution of Myanmar in 2008, where they actually made the Rohingyas stateless. And 2010, from this agreement in 2010, we see a general election in Myanmar where the NLD party of Aung San Suu Kyi came into the power. However, still the defense actually was under the control from behind the skin. Why? Because they created the Union Solidarity and Development Party, and it had 25% seat in the Burmese parliament. And also there was an agreement that in the lower part of the Burmese parliament, 1/4 would be from defense, and in the higher part of the Burmese or Myanmar parliament, at least 33% would be represented from the defense. So ultimately, it was a puppet government of the Aung San Suu Kyi. However, the Western liberal world started portraying Burma as a democratic country because of their own economic interests. However, still the Burma was full-fledged under control of Burmese Tatmadaw. This kind of agreement actually failed in 2015, when gradually the popularity of the NLD grew, or when the Tatmadaw of Myanmar saw that the popularity of the Aung San Suu Kyi's party is increasing, they actually pulled the rush, and that created the problem. We see the association of the Kony. He was a lawyer and one of the very influential Muslim leader of Burma. So Kony, one of the long-term friend of Aung San Suu Kyi, was assassinated in 2017 in Myanmar International Airport. So this actually shows that the Tatmadaw will not tolerate representation of the different ethnic communities, particularly the Rohingyas, in Myanmar government or in the power house of the Myanmar. So this aspect we have to keep in our mind, because still now, I am wrapping up now, Burma is not
just Mr. Simon Taluga, just in a couple of minutes, 1 or 2 minutes here. Can you make
yes, I'm wrapping up within 1 minute. Yeah. So lastly, the Rohingya issue is not only an economic issue, it rooted back to the ethnic conflict and ultra-nationalism of the Burmese, and also the power of the clash with the power-hungry Tatmadaw, who is actually Burma majority. So I am not sure what would be the future of the Burma, but even if the Aung San Suu Kyi come into the power, if they can defeat this present Burmese Tatmadaw, the basic character of the Myanmar would not be changed that much, because unfortunately they possess hatred against these ethnic communities, particularly the Burmese, are yet not to tolerate the other ethnic communities in the powerhouse of the Burma. So until and unless this status quo is not changed, whether it is a Tatmadaw or whether it is the NLD of the Aung San Suu Kyi, things will not be changed that much. Thank you.